Alright, Sumer, the world's first civilization. First of all, let's talk about what makes a civilization different than just a group of people. The World History Patterns of Interaction textbook tells us there's 5 things that set a civilization apart from just a group of people. So, one, that would be advanced cities. So we know there were quite a few cities in Sumer. 2, specialized workers. So when you just have a purely agrarian economy, or subsistence farming, everyone kind of makes what they can eat and lives off what they make farming. But when you have specialized workers, you have people who are, let's say, carpenters, people who make clothing, anything like that. Complex institutions. So complex institutions, number 3, that would be things like religion, maybe some sort of class system, like you have the priests and the kings on top. Then you have the workers, or the specialized workers below that. Then you probably have people like the slaves on the bottom. 4, record keeping. So once a lot of trade starts happening, you gotta keep track of that trade and keep track of how much money's coming in, how much money's leaving. So that kind of led to the advent of writing and new technology. That's kind of a given. Alright, so this is Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia means land between the rivers. Those 2 rivers would be the Tigris and the Euphrates. They're written here. Right here's the Tigris. It flows north to south like most rivers do. And on the west is the Euphrates. So it's the Tigris on the east and the Euphrates on the west. And this whole area between the Tigris and the Euphrates is known as Mesopotamia. But in the south, that is the southern portion here is Sumer. This is kind of where modern-day Iraq would be. I'll have a little better map in a couple slides. So we have these city-states, and they start popping up around 3500 BC. But as you can see, we had 4300 BC written here. That's because people were around that time, but the actual city-states didn't start popping up until around 3500 BC. So the largest city was Uruk. It had a population of about 10,000. And it would be dominant for about 500 years until 3000 BC. And then all the states, or the city-states, would compete, and they would eventually become more powerful, and their power would wax and wane. And the other city-states included Kish, Eridu, Lagash, and Nippur. Each city had their own deity, and there was somewhat of a hierarchy between those deities, depending on what city had the most control at any point. So you can see here are those other cities. Here is the Uruk, the most powerful starting out, and kind of would remain the most powerful, but also quite powerful. So, based off artifacts that have been discovered at dig sites, archaeologists have concluded that artifacts as far away as India, or what is modern-day India, have made their way to Sumer. So trade would happen along this route here, and eventually artifacts from India would make their way all the way to Sumer, and vice versa. Artifacts from Sumer would make their way to India. So let's talk about the Epic of Gilgamesh. The Epic of Gilgamesh is the first epic poem, or the first really piece of published work that we know of. So, let's see here. Key facts. The Epic of Gilgamesh. Written as far back as the 3rd dynasty of Ur, around 2100 BC. It was written in ancient Sumer / Mesopotamia. Published. Let's see here. And it's set in ancient Sumer. So that's what makes it important here. So let's talk about what the Epic of Gilgamesh is, or who Gilgamesh was. Gilgamesh was said to be a king of Uruk, and he didn't exactly treat his constituents so well, and he was somewhat of a womanizer, and his constituents, or his subjects, asked, or begged the gods to take care of Gilgamesh, or get rid of him, or curb his power in some way. So the gods sent Enkidu, that's spelled like this. So Enkidu was, I guess there's various translations, but he was a wild man. He lived with the beasts, and he was as powerful as Gilgamesh. So there was a battle between Gilgamesh and Enkidu, and Gilgamesh defeated Enkidu, but he let Enkidu live. The two became best friends. They went on adventures. They killed giants together. But then the gods eventually killed Enkidu, and Gilgamesh, was very sad, and he went on to seek immortality. So he went. So this story talks about a flood similar to that was in the Old Testament of the Bible, and Gilgamesh seeks out the last, or the only survivor of that flood, and seeks the secret of immortality, and that's kind of the gist of that story. Cuneiform. So we know that the Sumerians were trading pretty wide, and with all that trade, they had to have something to keep track of their trade with, so they invented the first known form of writing. Cuneiform means wedge-shaped. Just describes what it looks like. This picture is an example of cuneiform. Maybe the most important thing to understand about this type of writing versus our modern day writing is pictographic versus alphabetic. So, pictographic versus alphabetic. So, I guess with English that's alphabetic, we can write a word like apple. Each letter stands for a sound that is made. So so apple. But with a pictographic system, it's not like that. They would just have some sort of symbol, and they'd know that would stand for apple. It doesn't have to do with syllables or sounding out anything. So that's, I guess, and Egyptian hieroglyphics were also pictographic, much like cuneiform, but in a different way. This is a little better map. Here's modern day Saudi Arabia. Here's Iran. Egypt's over here. And here's Mesopotamia. And then, in the south here, that would be this area here. That would have been Sumer. Alright, let's finish up by talking about the fall of Sumer. So around the year 2334 BCE, Sargon of Akkad and the Akkadians invaded Sumer and took over, and essentially ended what we know as Sumer. This year, 2334, that's speculation, of course. No one really knows exactly what year this happened. There wasn't really good record keeping, but that's just a good guess. So, here's a little bit better map. Take a look at here. Alright, yep. So, we already know where Sumer is. We know Sumer was in the south here. And so Akkad was just north of Sumer. And once Akkad took over Sumer, the Akkadians became the main culture in Mesopotamia. So the Akkadians were a Semitic people. That just means they spoke a Semitic language, and the Semites became the new main power, or new primary people of Mesopotamia for a time after that.